So what I want to do, I'll just introduce this concept that we've talked about remote viewing or learning by consciousness and contact. The whole idea, the foundation of CE5 contact is the mind and consciousness being used to not only sense or see ET craft or people and worlds, but also then to flip that around to what I call coherent thought sequencing, where basically once you make that contact and image, you can then guide them to where you are. And the way you do that is literally flip it around from looking out to connecting to their mind and their console, their technology-assisted consciousness systems, and then showing exactly where you are. And it is like, Google Earth or something where you zoom in, but you're zooming in from where you perceive them. So if you perceive them under the water, you're showing them this, right? If you're seeing them out from another galaxy, then you're going to see that, you're going to bring them in from that angle. If you pick up one that's out by Mars, then you're going to look towards the sun and the earth and then zoom into this part of the earth, showing them where you are. Now, some people are more visual than others. Others are more verbal. But remember, whether it's visual or verbal, what they're really picking up on, because, and this is why I went through the cosmology the other day, is that in the structure of consciousness, there's a level that's pre-verbal, even pre-visual. It's called causality, and it's the thought essence of it. So in other words, even if you're seeing it or using English to describe it, within that is a deeper level of its actual meaning, and that is the transcendent level, deeper consciousness. So they can pick up on that. That is what I call the universal translator. The universal translator, you have consciousness, and then the aspect of a discrete, D-I-S-C-R-E-T-E, not D-I-S-C-R-E-E-T, look it up, a specific, discrete thing. And so that means that if you, like I use the analogy, you can say a tree. Well, that's an English word. You can see a tree, but within the image of the tree is the essence, the causative thought itself that is actually deeper. That's how translation is happening. Interstellar is at that level. And intuition happens that way too. And this is why it can be a knowingness as opposed to a specific word or image. It's a knowingness. And people know why. I just know. Because it's coming in from something that is deeper and more profound within the mind and consciousness field. Does that make sense? So when you understand that, then it doesn't really matter how good your visualization is, whatever your tendency is, right? Some people are very visual and very good at visualization. Others, they kind of want to think it in words. Others can do it by just being, right? And working on a much deeper level of knowingness and specificity. So that's why we're doing the coherent thought sequencing, because their technologies interface directly with that. And this, of course, is, in these programs that have used it in a rather disturbing way to sort of hijack the craft and bring them into a strike area. But that's why all the way back to the early 90s, the people in those operations knew that this was it, this worked. And it's why I was told by a national security agency operative back in 92, they said they're very upset that you figured out the Rosetta Stone of contact, right? Because it is the Rosetta Stone. It's basically the ability, and then by universalizing it, saying, look, you teach them about consciousness, that you're awake, you can use your mind to sense. You may not see clearly, you may get a sense of it. Then what happens is that you can then connect to them, but you need to understand they have the innate telepathic ability, but their accuracy is greatly augmented through these technologies. That's what the whole technology-assisted consciousness is. It assists their abilities, but also the consciousness assisting and directing the technology. So, you just look at a computer screen and think, directed a beam of thought, it does it, right? That's how it works. So visualize that. And that's why this does work. And that's also why in covert programs, they began to use it, unfortunately, for a very destructive purpose. We're doing the opposite. We're doing it as ambassadors from humanity to their world and their species. And the good news is that they very much understand the science of consciousness that we went through the other day. They understand the cosmology and how it's structured. And they love it when people do what we're doing. Why? You think about this, and except for the French government that did a project with us back in 2009, 10, 11, those documents are in the archive. I call it the French initiative with the Ministry of Defense. It was an official operation. When you read those documents, you'll weep. I mean, they're so beautiful. And their commitment to go on a long-term journey peacefully to make contact with these ETs, right? So that was the seed of something growing, and then it kind of fell apart after the admiral who was in charge passed away and the president at the time, Sarkozy, left office. But it shows it can be done by a government, and it was successful, by the way. It can be done by any government, right? So that's the other thing. If you're from other countries, you keep in mind that, there are 8 billion people on the planet, and America has 340 million of them, which is like 4.5%. So it's a big world out there. And so this progress, both on the disclosure front and on the contact front, could happen from anywhere. And the first serious government that puts some kind of resources behind this will lead the world on this issue. And I want to be very clear, it doesn't have to be the United States, but right now that's where a lot of this is happening officially, but in terms of CE5, it could happen from any country. There may be countries that don't have a really strong basis in, these black covert programs dealing with this, but they could still set up the mechanism and the support for contact. And even I could advise them on countermeasures so that the ET craft are protected when they come in. I can get into that, but you need the resources of some significant government operation, but that can happen anywhere on the planet. It doesn't have to be the United States. So I know there are people from all over the world here, Norway, Canada, other places in Europe, so just keep that in mind. India. I know their prime minister is very interested in this, Modi, so have had his military people reach out. But he's also extremely interested in consciousness and meditation, regardless of what you want of its politics. But so this could happen anywhere, so just keep that in mind. In the meanwhile, the real action is with we the people, because the more that the people are doing this and are in a state where they come together, you do get this critical mass effect in consciousness, the so-called Maharishi effect, that 1% effect. And if you've seen the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, it really shows the studies that were done in superfluidity and helium, where once you would reach about, when you cool it down to absolute zero, a container of helium, once 1% of those molecules became coherent and aligned, there was what's called a phase transition. And the container began to be very kind of roiling, boiling, just for a brief period. There's a bit of chaos, and then instantly it becomes a coherent field. It's called superfluidity. And it takes on these magical, coherent properties. It goes from one form to another. So I view all of the earth and humanity as at that phase transition point. On one level, there is increased chaos and disruption and what have you. On the other end, there's a growing number of people who are awake and conscious. And so as the one grows, there may be more chaos, but then there'll be this point of transition. So the more that we want to be the points of coherence, right? We want to be the points of peace, of truth, of fixing these violent systems, but also in consciousness being these points of coherence that come together And you only need about 1%. It's been proven over and over and over again. I think it could be less in consciousness, because consciousness is not a mechanistic, chemical, or molecular system. But 1% of the Earth's population is 80 million people. I mean, it's not that many, really. So this is why my fantasy of having a contact and disclosure rock concert that reaches a couple billion people, right? With all these bands, and it is a truism. You can do this by yourself, but the expression "God loves those that work together." That when people come together, it's the 1 and 1 isn't 2. 1 and 1 is 10. And they've done this with the consciousness studies at Princeton, with the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, the peer lab by Dr. Bob John. And I knew him, and he loved what we were doing. He said, well, you're really doing it in a clinical, like out in the world, and proving what we've done in the lab about this mind effect and consciousness effect. So view it that way, that we're all, everyone's gets keyed in on me, and, my little thing. No, look at yourself as your individuality, but that you're plugging in and lighting up this bigger network. So when you go home after this cruise, after a couple more nights of this, do this on your own and find people of like mind, right? And it doesn't have to be a cast of thousands. Obviously, I mean, when I do this, there's a lot of people here. Actually, this is a small group. We usually do this with 500, 800 people with a large group. But you can do it with, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. Getting much bigger than 8, you get too many egos and too much incoherence and too much human drama, right? So you want a group that's coherent, as opposed to just, it's quality over quantity, right? So when you do this at home, look for people of like mind, but that you also resonate with, and there's not any built-in problems. I think it's very important. Now, when you're doing a training, you get all types, right? And Justice has headed up CE5 Texas and had 50 or 100, I don't know how many you've had before come out. Oh, yeah, 100, and he's amazing. He's a great teacher. And very effective. So you can do that sort of for a day or two weekend, but you still want to have a group that you're connected to that's coherent, that's doing this consistently. That's why every month we have the first Saturday of each month is a CE5 contact month, where groups go out all over the world and are doing it the same day. So it has this effect. And that's done deliberately because of the mass effect of a lot of people in that state of meditative consciousness doing this, because it creates what Rupert Sheldrake called the morphogenic field propagation, where some people liken this the 100th monkey effect, but where once a certain number of people begin to do something, it non-locally, without any direct connection, through the integrating aspect of mind and consciousness, affect people who don't even know you're doing it. And they begin to spontaneously do it, or want to do it, or be inspired to do it. So we're more powerful. All of us are more powerful than we give her credit for, because the totality of the unbounded conscious being is folded within us. So if you connect to that, rather than say, oh, I want to see this, and I want to do, the thing the ETs are least interested in, someone says, well, I want one to come up to me and shake hands and have a bagel and lox. And they have to prove themselves to me, because I'm so important, right? No, they don't. And they're not interested. Someone with that attitude, they're going to go, fuck off, mate. I mean it. That's the wrong attitude. That attitude is the least likely to succeed, right? Because it's self-referencing instead of larger purpose. Ironically, the more you're in a state of intending, but not overly self-referencing, the more the ETs will appear. It's the zen of this. It's the grace of it. It's the difference between force, something being forced, and something unfolding due to the inner power of it. Very big distinction. This is a key lesson, what I'm sharing right now. It's also true in the meditative state, to be in that state and letting go, as it were, letting go and letting God, letting go and letting this happen, as opposed to overly forcing it. Most people's meditations and their attempts to see in remote view are simply cut off by their overly forcing it, and it's too ego-driven. And which is why the techniques that trick the mind in some of these organizations, it'll work to make your remote view, but it also doesn't lead to the overall advancement of higher states of consciousness, right? This is why I rejected the device that was offered to me by the engineer who had invented it in 1956. That would have just sort of helped you click into that, because I think it's safer if it evolves from within. I was friends with a number of people who were early remote viewers, and also General Stubblewine took a bunch of these young guys through a place where I've been called the Monroe Institute, and they were doing the hemisync. Well, what happened is that they did this in a forced way. So in other words, here's our military objective. You're going to learn this, and this is because we're going to target this, this, and this. I talked to so many of those early remote viewers who went through that kind of training that did not have the soul blossoming like a lotus, but a mind focus that was using certain kinds of techniques that almost tricked the mind so you could do it. But the people were not getting the foundation of spirituality and purpose and higher purpose beyond the tactical mission. And I was told by virtually every one of those people that those young guys ended up committing suicide, becoming alcoholic, having mental breakdowns. Why? It's because they were not approaching it in an integrated, holistic, spiritual fashion. So are there things you can do to bypass it? Yes, but you should only do that if you're also grounded in this larger understanding and purpose. And it needs to be a purpose larger than yourself. It has to be a purpose larger than your own ego and selfish interests. Interestingly, when you hit that sweet spot, that's when the craft and the phenomenon ETs appear. If you're not in that zone, I don't care how much you do this, it's not going to happen. That is the key. That's the secret sauce. And it sounds very vague and very mushy. It really isn't, because that's what they're looking for. I mean, they're looking for people who are at the level of wanting to do this to assist the world and them, and for a higher purpose. Now, obviously we all want to see a craft or a being, and it's exciting and it's like this. But so many people are driven that way, and it gets self-referenced. And then it becomes like, it's insulting, because then the ETs feel like they're dolphins at SeaWorld, right? And they're there to jump through your hoops and do this for you. No, they're not. It's insulting. It's disrespectful. So this is why, I corrected Jake Burrow. I said, no, don't summon them in. They're not, your dog and pony show, right? There's a attitude about it. There's a respect as an ambassador, but there's also the fact that attitude shuts off the oneness, right? Because it's too much individual ego-driven, as opposed to, why are we doing this? So that intent and the purity of heart of it, but also the practice of it, very much depends on that attitudinal or angle of attack, as it were, or how you approach it. So if you approach it in a forced way or something very self-referencing because you're a curiosity seeker or you're a conference junkie or they're not interested in that. And they're not going to be interested in you. I'm saying this very bluntly because if that lesson isn't internalized by people, you're not going to get anywhere with this. I've seen this for so many years. And I'll give you an example. We were, the first time we were at Joshua Tree, there was a man who kept surfacing and he had one of those road slugs, the RVs. Oh my God. But every time, and he came to a number of things, and he was very ego-driven, but he also had an ulterior motive because he wanted to see and document it so he could figure out the technology so he could be the next Rockefeller of energy. Now, we didn't know that, but I could sense the energy wasn't clear, right? And so every time we had a major event, he was in the toilet, distract. So everyone would see it but him. Then another thing, everyone would see it but him. Because it was but it was his heart and his intent and his lack of clarity of purpose. And it was corrupt. It was ego-driven. It was avaricious, right? And good word, avaricious, greedy. So I think that's something for people to really take to heart. The more you're pure-hearted and innocent and childlike, not childish, childlike, the more the ETs go, they're very childlike, actually, when you meet them. And they're very, very intelligent, but they're very pure-hearted. So that's what that witness who had those two ETs, that's what he felt. And he said the fact that we're trying to capture and kill these beings, it just crushed his soul. Because he was basically a good guy, right? A good man in a bad situation. And this is why Jake Barber, when he was carrying that egg-shaped craft, that one craft, not the egg-shaped, another one, he just, when he tells the story, first time he told me, he wept. Because it was so, you could feel the consciousness and the purpose. And of course, they just capture, they're going to kill these and torture these beings. So that is something to really keep in mind. So that's what they're looking, that's who they're looking for. They're looking for people who get what I'm saying right here. And so that, what I think we're wanting to do is understand that context and the heart and the soul of this. And then everything's possible. And if that isn't owned, then nothing's possible, to be honest with you. By the way, the great thing he missed, this guy who is this money-grubbing weirdo, Philistine, good word, Philistine. He is, yeah, I mean, when I realized what he was really after, he was removed from the operation. But we were at this place the first time, 1996 at Joshua Tree National Park. And we had gone down to out Geology Tour Road, those of you who've been there, and we went down from where the high plane is down where it goes down into another lower valley. And we set up at that thing. I would do these small group things with 60 people in a circle. It's way too many people. Now it's 20 or 30, if I do it. And he was there with his road slug, and we were doing this, and I got the message from the ETs, not here, later, not here. And I could feel they were saying to go back towards the north and east, out Geology Tour Road, to another site. So I said, sorry, folks, I know it's taken a long time to set all this up, but we're leaving, right? Because now here I can't say we're leaving because we're on a ship, we'd be in the ocean. But so it is what it is. But but I just follow that, clear instructions that I get in image. So we got up, broke down camp, as it were, moved back out, and as we're leaving, now someone left ahead of me, which is a mistake. If you ever do this with me on land, don't ever put your car in front of mine. You will be run into a ditch. But how sweet. But we were going along, and I think it was my third daughter was in the back seat, and Sherry, I was driving, Sherry was in the passenger. All of a sudden, all the lights and everything on that car went down and back up. And I said, they're here. It was like this electromagnetic effect. Look over, and a 300-foot diameter teal blue craft, huge, drops like a rock out of the sky and comes down. It looked like a Hershey's Kiss, but it had a trailing, almost like the little thing you pull on the Hershey Kiss, but it was like this beautiful, and it was a light ship, almost like a plasma of that color, of that shape, but it wasn't quite 3D. And I realized because it went and it lit up the whole desert floor where we were supposed to be, and then it merged into the earth and went under the earth. And I was told this is where they have a deep facility, ETs, out there in the center of Joshua Tree. And that's where we've gone ever since. So we found that place, and that's where we've been doing it. And that's why that happened. But that whole event, so many people saw that. But this Philistine money-grubbing guy didn't see that either. I mean, it literally lit up the whole national park. I said, see, your attitude sucks, bro. So, not going to happen. So, it is funny, but it's actually really something to take to heart. You know, why are you doing this? I mean, it has to be, yes, you're curious and it's a great experience to have, but it has to be tied to something besides your own ego and your own selfish interest. Otherwise, you're not an ambassador to anything. You're just trying to, sort of indulge yourself, which our society is very narcissistic and self-indulgent. And it's hard to break out of that into the consciousness of altruism and doing something for something else besides yourself, right? You know, I mean, and it's become an old-fashioned anachronism to care about anyone but yourself in our society, more so now than it was even 30 years ago. I mean, it's complete collapse of ethics, morality, and selflessness. It's all just that. So there's part of that. So don't buy into that. Pull out of that. Visualize yourself as a child of God and a denizen of the universe, and that you have taken on the task to volunteer to be an ambassador and a liaison from humans to them to create this, open up this era, whole new era of universal peace, peace on earth, but also peace in space with these other civilizations. That's what we're moving into. So if you get that mission and that's what you're dedicated to, it'll happen. And if you don't, if you're here doing it for any other reason, you might as well be, a cigarette hanging out of your mouth full of the slot machines in the casino, all right? Just have fun and have at it, right? Like everybody else or whatever. But, sorry, but what we want to do now, I want to go through some exercises that are fun that you can practice at home on your own or with your team. And what we're going to do first is I'm going to teach you a pranayama exercise that I can't do unless there's light and you can see what I'm doing. So that's why I didn't do it the first 2 nights up on the deck. And a pranayama is a word for a breathing exercise, and there's a deeper meaning of prana, and that's the energy and life force in the heart and mind, but it's actually a physical component to it with the breath. Because we always think our bodies are separate from our spiritual aspect, when in reality it's an integrated system. And the body is actually consciousness. The body is, and our DNA and our physical body is actually emanating from consciousness and the causality and the astral body and awareness. So people have had it backwards. This physical body isn't manifesting your consciousness and your body of light. The consciousness and your body of light, your individuality is manifesting the physical body, right? And so there are things you can do physically that assist and center yourself for meditation and consciousness, and vice versa. So this whole mind-body interface is a very real thing, been studied scientifically for 50 years now, at institutions. So this is why the whole mind-body studies began, because they found that meditators, heart rates, blood pressure can go down, coherence in the brain waves across the corpus callosum, the dividing part of the left and right hemispheres. You get this coherence across that part. And this pranayama I'm going to teach you does that. It's an alternating breath that does that sort of harmonization and synchronization across the 2 hemispheres, and it helps it become centered. So that's this exercise, right? So what I'm going to show it to you first is, and you keep your eyes open because you can see, the way to do this is assuming you don't have a cold, because you're doing it with your nostrils, is that you can take your thumb and close your right nostril, like that. Breathe in with your left. Take your index finger, close the left, and breathe out with your right. Breathe in with your right nostril. Close the right nostril, breathe out with your left. Breathe in with your left nostril. Close that nostril, open your right, breathe out with the right. Breathe in with the right nostril. Close the right nostril, open the left, and breathe out with the left. You get it? That's all it is. It's alternating breath through that. Now, when you do that, we're going to sit for a moment in a few minutes and do that with our eyes closed. You can do it at any speed. I recommend people do it at something comfortable. You don't be huffing and puffing or whatever is comfortable to do. It is hard to do if you have any congestion, obviously, in which case you can do the regular breathing exercise that we taught the first nights. Hello? I heard a beep. And do that. But if you can do this pranayama, and you can support, if you're right-handed, you can support your, like this, sitting, and do in with the left, out the right nostril, and you just use your thumb and index to close those nostrils. What are we doing with that? The air is going in one side, out the other, in the other side out. So the air that comes in one side always goes out the opposite. But it's creating a resonance in breath, in prana, that does create brain coherence. They've studied this. It causes coherence across the brain, left and right hemispheres, but also in the heart space, right? Because the heart has neurons, they've found. There are a bunch of neurons, like in the brain, in the heart. And so it's a good exercise, and it helps to do that for 2 or 3 minutes before you meditate. Why? Because by doing that with your eyes closed, it helps you settle in and become centered and coherent. And then you go into the using the mantra or whatever technique works for you. Now, I teach this mantra meditation. I'm not chauvinistic about it. Is that if you have something that works better for you, do it, right? I mean, again, most people get very bombastic. You know, there's only one way to do it, and it's my way. I'm not like that. I liken all of us to, if the wheel of life and of this unbounded consciousness is, and the center of that is this, the hub, that is this silent, pure space of samadhi, pure consciousness. And there are 8 billion spokes that go into that hub, and each one of us are unique. No two are alike. And so you find your own path. All a teacher can do is to say, here is the approach, here's how to understand it, here are some techniques, and then ultimately, everyone makes it their own. Everyone learns how to meditate in their own unique way. Everyone knows how to do, therefore, this remote viewing, or seeing with consciousness, or the intuitive knowing in their own way. And this is why what I have found is that everyone can do it, but if you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, it may not work. You need to find what kind of work for you. We had an early member of our team who was a medical doctor who lived in LA, and she loved to play the harp. And she would get into this meditative state playing the harp and go into higher consciousness. Just the tonality, she would pick the right tones and the motion. And she would just be in this meditative, it was amazing. And then she could see how these experiences. So there are many, many ways. So you find your own path, right? I'm just giving you the knowledge of it and some instructions, and then you can do whatever works for you, all right? I always tell people that. I'm the opposite of a bombastic guru saying, you have to be rigid. See, the more rigid it is, the more it's ignorant, because it's not accounting for the uniqueness of each and every created soul. And if there are an infinite number of individual souls in the cosmos, or 8 billion on the planet, there are 8 billion paths, because they're each unique. And it's fine. You know, this is why the beginning of the end of knowledge and wisdom in organizations, religions, is not understanding that. Right? Because then it becomes one way. And then it becomes just sort of a rote catechism as opposed to anything meaningful. So I'm just saying this so that when whatever I'm teaching, adapt it, make it your own. It's fine. So the goal is to experience this expanded, unbounded state of mind, not to be, some kind of, rigid approach, right? So what I'd like to do now, I just go into a meditative state. We're going to do the pranayama for, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll sit in silence, and then I'll move you over to doing the in with the nose and out with the breath, and then we're going to go into a meditation, and we're going to do a remote view exercise, right? After you're in quietness. So the way to understand this is like, you first want to set up the conditions. You want to be in the meditative quiet state, then intend to see and know things. Most people go right to trying to, but it's more powerful if you're centered into the non-local field of consciousness. And then it becomes easier and easier to access information. Now, eventually, you'll get to where that can happen on the fly. You can be driving down the road or whatever. But when you're learning this, it's good to sort of put aside the time and focus on getting into that consciousness state, and then endeavor to see a remote place or gain knowledge through consciousness, or what's called the subjective means of knowing, right? So as opposed to the objective 5 senses and what have you. So that's really what we're going to do. And I think that if you do that in your daily life, like a couple, 3 times a day, spend time in meditation, you're going to find that then all throughout the day and night, you'll be open to intuitive guidance, and it'll just spontaneously come to you because you're going to be familiar with that. But you have to begin to learn to do that and center. And that's why the first step of the CE5 contact protocols is really this meditative state. The second step is to then see or sense the ETs and then and make contact in consciousness and thought. And the third is to then do the coherent thought sequencing, guide them to where you are, show them where you are, right? In that order. Does it make sense? Yeah. Now, eventually you get to the point where all of that happens virtually in one instant, because you're in that consciousness, you're intuitive contact, and there. That's what I do. So I don't need to go through but you need to once you do that and practice it, you know what it's like. First time you go to a new place, a whole bunch of roads and turn here and turn there and what have you. It seems very complicated, right? And it takes long. It seems like it takes forever. Then you do it the second time, the third time. By the time you do it 50 or 100 times, the same route, you don't even think about it. It's on automaticity, like you just automatically go. That's what this is. The practice makes it perfect because it becomes something you just can easily do. That discipline is important, because if you don't have that discipline to get to that point, then it doesn't become just, you don't really own it. It doesn't unfold naturally where you can do it all the time. And I call this rapid access remote viewing and contact. You just, boom, do it like that. But it's not like you're not rushed. It's just it's spontaneous. But you have to first learn it and then practice it, and it becomes more and more natural and easier. The analogy of driving somewhere and how laborious it is, and then it seems more and more effortless. So this is the same way. This becomes more and more effortless the more you do it and practice it, and then it just becomes part of your nature. And this is true of any skill, right? If you're a surgeon or whatever you do in your life, first times you're doing it, it's laborious, right? And then after you've done it a few hundred times, it's like, you don't even think about it. It's just easy. So let's close our eyes, and we're going to do the pranayama first. So again, with your thumb, close your right nostril and breathe in with your left. Close the left, breathe out with your right. Breathe in with the right. Close the right, breathe out with your left. So I will be silent You just do this at whatever pace is comfortable. And as you do this, lightly focus on the breath, becoming aware of the mind watching the breath. Now, let us begin to just breathe normally with our eyes closed. And if you can, breathe in with your nose, out with your mouth. You see, that's in the vertical direction. The back and forth was more horizontal. So as you breathe in with your nose, see yourself filled with the light of prana, life force. And as you exhale, see you're releasing into the air all your restrictions, stress, limitations, dissolve away by Mother Earth. With each inward breath, you become more energized and centered, filled with conscious light. And as you exhale, you become calmer and relaxed from your feet all the way up to your head, deeply relaxed and centered. So now let's breathe normally. And with each breath, become aware of the quiet mind within. Just watch the breath as you normally would breathe. Without straining, just become conscious of the mind watching the breath. That awakeness silence. And see that this consciousness in its pure form never changes. It is pure awakeness, watching the breath, hearing sounds, perceiving thoughts, perceiving your own self. So let us connect to that aspect of quiet consciousness and see that it is a vast and infinite field, not limited by space or time. It is just a quiet screen that everything falls upon in the images of life and relativity. But the consciousness never changes. It is always infinite, and it is always beyond space and time, boundless. And now gently, with your heart and mind, feel that those around us in this room are awake. And that awake consciousness within each of us is a singularity. It is the deep and pure conscious mind shining alike within each soul, illuminating the window of each of our being. And so we see we are brothers and sisters at a deep level of this consciousness, of being. And so we are all one. And then let us see that this consciousness, awareness, is not limited to within ourselves, but it is actually omnipresent. And see that we connect to this subtle and deep aspect of consciousness, and that it is in fact fills the room and the space of the ship and all the dimensions folded within this one. And so it is in the sky and under the ocean, in the earth and in space. And so with this faculty of being awake in pure consciousness, you can perceive any place you wish to see once you are centered and acknowledge the true nature of the mind, of the conscious field. So now let us dive into this vast, infinite ocean of quiet awareness. And each of us can be likened to a ripple or a wave on this infinite ocean. And yet we can perceive ourselves as separate as that wave, or the reality that we are all part and integrated and one with the ocean of mind, of infinite consciousness, of this spirit. So now let us relax and go more deeply into this perception of this vast and infinite ocean of awareness within us. And relax and become more and more centered and silent. And now as we sense that silent mind, let all of us together go on a journey. Let us affirm that any point in space or time is actually folded within this field consciousness, the aspect of our own aware and conscious selves that is unbounded and connected and omnipresent. And thus you may see any point in space or time. And so let's gently intend to connect to that aspect of ourselves, even as we are conscious of this space and of our bodies and our individuality. And in a relaxed way, accept that truth. And so we travel together north of the Caribbean into the United States. And we travel north into the area of Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains, approximately 125 miles from Washington, D.C. to the southwest. And then we hover in the sky above the town of Charlottesville, Virginia, and the University of Virginia. And to the east, southeast of the town is Thomas Jefferson's home, Monticello. And just take some time to look at it, see it, sense it. And then let us go west about 15 miles into the county, in the farmland, in the mountains. And you can see my house. And it's a 3-story brick Georgian on about 65 acres. And there's a black gate at the entrance. And so we travel up the driveway, and then we go through the front door in the center, and we go into the foyer. And the foyer has a white marble floor and a crystal chandelier in the center. And underneath the chandelier is a round, very old colonial table, wood. And on that table is an object. And so take some time to see the object. What is it? What is it made of? What is its shape? What does it mean? And just allow yourself to gaze at this object in the foyer of the house. Now I will be silent, and knowing this is the task, you can go into quiet meditation of any form you wish, breathing, the mantra, mindfulness, and then allow your impression of that object to just come to you. You may see it, you may simply know it, you may get the word of it. Whatever it is, it will come to you as you know knowledge through consciousness in your own way. So now I will be silent, and let's do that together.